There we go. Good morning, and welcome to the Data and Analytics panel. As businesses become more digital, our processes, our products, and our customers generate an increasing amount of data. Our challenge is to use that data to make more informed decisions and to deliver better customer experiences. There's a ton of hype in this space and lots of catchy phrases like data exhaust and dark data. However, we're going to skip all the hype this morning, and we're going to have a real talk with 3 Milwaukee CIOs about their experiences and challenges getting more value from their data. I'm Scott Sievert, your moderator this morning. I'm a managing director at Accenture, co-chair of Tech United, and as you just saw in the video, I'm leading the launch of our new initiative called Tech for Good Marketplace. On the panel with me this morning are 3 CIOs from 3 very different industries. So Holly Baumgart, VP of IT at Sargento Foods. Holly. Chad Steiner, CIO of Clarios, and Neil Sample, CIO of Northwestern Mutual. Yeah. We'll spend about 30 minutes on the panel, and then we'll open up for Q&A. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to enter your questions at any time. Sam Zilke from Freighter will be monitoring the Q&A, and we'll read your questions during the Q&A at the end. So, every company is at a very different place in their journey of using data. So I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves as they take turns answering the first question, which is, where is their company on its journey? What are they doing in this space? Holly, would you like to get us started?
Sure, Scott. Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here today with Tech United. At Sargento, we have a really exciting roadmap around data and analytics that we're kicking off. And I'll just share a little bit about 2 of those initiatives that are upcoming this year. The first one is going to be a project to advance our data governance across the company and mature our capabilities around data governance, understanding our data literacy, and training our employees on how to understand and leverage their data. Simultaneously, we're going to kick off an additional project to determine, select, and implement a new business intelligence platform that will sit in the cloud. And we're doing these 2 projects at the same time, really on purpose, so that we have the governance for our data that we can leverage once we implement our new platform. The goals of our program are to partner with our business stakeholders across the company to enable them to make better driven data decisions and empower them to achieve even a higher capability set in the roles that they have by access to that data and the ability to leverage new and exciting tools. So we're really we're at an early stage on our journey and taking the next steps on investment into this space. So I'm really excited to be here today and share a little bit more about how we got to this place and also field any questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Holly. Chad, you want to introduce yourself and tell a little bit about where you guys are at?
Sure. Thank you, Scott. Also, pleasure to be here today alongside Holly and Neil and yourself, Scott, in order to talk about this exciting topic. At Clarios, we're in an interesting point in time, right? So we have been working for about 2 years now in our carve out and separation from our former parent, Johnson Controls. And so we had made some significant investments as part of JCI into an on-premise data lake and a lot of internal analytics, I'll call it, things that were used for running the business inside. And so now, as we had the opportunity to carve out and sort of have a take 2 at this, we went back, much like it sounds like Holly's going to do at Sargento, and analyze the field of what are the platforms that are available to us, what's sort of best practice now. And this field has advanced so rapidly that if you do an analysis today and then you come back and do that analysis 12 months from now, you might get a totally different answer. And so you have to kind of decide what horse are you going to hitch your wagon to and how you're going to go. We ended up deciding on an Azure-based Snowflake implementation, and so that's really where we moved all of our data assets to, was into the Snowflake environment. And I'm happy to say the team successfully did this in under a year. They moved about 185 terabytes of information from what was sort of multiple on-prem sources out into the Snowflake environment. And now the starting place, once again, as a manufacturer of automotive batteries, was internal reporting, internal analysis. And so we have a number of different domains of information that we have available to us in Snowflake now that we extract through different visualization tools. Power BI is one of them. But we're doing that to analyze HR data, analyze supply chain data, analyze category management data for our customers. And so there's a number of different sort of solutions that we've built all in that platform that are used by a variety of users, both domestically and across the globe. The things that are probably more exciting and still a little bit nascent for us is we did do a pretty neat project around diagnostics tools that involved IoT coming into the same environment. And so here's where we were trying to get better accuracy into the testing of batteries in cars out in the field and be able to gather that information. That used to mean people kind of driving around location to location and collecting maybe anecdotal feedback from folks. And now what we've been able to do is partner with a test manufacturer and design a device that's connected that allows us to pull those test samples back now into this new environment and do analysis on things like warranty to understand whenever our product was being replaced or someone was buying a new product, was it really a failure or was it sort of a misclassification where it wasn't a failure of that product? And so that's allowed us to go back and have commercial conversations in terms of warranty terms and agreements with our distributors and our customers. And then the most advanced thing that we're just experimenting with now, just literally in the past few weeks here, is machine learning on the platform and using the Azure machine learning capabilities in order to look at predictive failure. So in our products, we run long range testing. So we may put our product on test for a number of months. And it used to be you wouldn't know until the end of, say, that 6-month period what the outcome was going to be. Now we have enough samples that we can run a machine learning algorithm that actually has gotten to a 98% ability to predict whether that battery is going to pass at the end of 6 months or not. And we can tell that part way through the 6-month period. So that's saving us time in product development, which is great. So I think that's kind of the new frontier that we're starting to experiment with now. And that's Clarios.
That's cool. That's awesome. Anil, you want to introduce yourself and tell a little bit where you guys are at?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So I think I'm probably the newest person to roll on panel. New to Northwestern Mutual, new to Milwaukee, new to Wisconsin. As you know, I'm a CIO at Northwestern Mutual, and I came to the company on what I like to think of as a data mission. Before that, I was actually Chief Operating Officer at Express Scripts, where annually we processed about 1.5 billion prescriptions in real time, and so it was definitely a real data mission. Express Scripts was acquired by Cigna, and before that, I was president at a little financial services company called American Express. Some people have heard of it. Also very much a data-driven organization. One of the things that attracted me to Northwestern Mutual, much like these other companies, is that it's a strange little secret, but I consider myself a recovering data scientist. So, back in the day, went to school a lot. So have a couple of undergraduate degrees, a couple of master's degrees. Ultimately did my PhD at Stanford in the data sciences group. And then for 3 years was a postdoctoral research fellow in big data at the CIA before we even called it big data. And so for a long time, I thought data was going to be my entire life. Turns out sometimes applying data in the commercial world is a little more impactful, a little more profitable, and a little more interesting. So I ended up moving off of that academic track and then coming into industry. But every place I've gone, data has been the focus. And so at Northwestern Mutual, one of the things that's interesting for us is that historically, we've been a data-driven enterprise before we were necessarily powered by data technologies or big data technology. So if we think about mortality, if we look at our underwriting in the insurance space, we've been the best permanent life underwriter historically, a very, very long time. Being a 160-year-old company, there was a time 130 years ago where maybe we weren't best in class, but for the last 130 years, we've been remarkably good. Similarly, on the investment side, it's sort of world-class investment performance that has been a focus that's led to our financial strength. And this is a data-driven exercise. But being world-class in two areas doesn't necessarily mean that our entire enterprise was a data-driven enterprise, that we were making database decisions, and that in a lot of cases, in the back office, I would say we were fairly average, or even to the point of perhaps mediocre. And so the idea for us, our transformation journey, is to take the success that we've had in data-driven elements in underwriting and insurance and investments, and bring that to the rest of the enterprise, to everything else we do. Data enable our field force, data enable our employee force, and ultimately data enable our clients as well. So that's our journey.
Cool. So Neil, I'm curious, you have this, these core competencies that you're working from, a area of strength, a launch point of strength. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing getting value from the data?
Well, our first challenge, our biggest challenge, I think, is really around our business model. We have what we call exclusive field distribution. And what that means is we don't broker our products. For example, you can't go online and just buy Northwestern Mutual planning and advice. That we have a series of set of representatives that do planning, that they're financial advisors that work with humans. And so unlike a Google or a Microsoft or an ad company, we can't just put in an algorithm and then expect it to perform and measure and test and have it out there and running. So every time we do something with data, every time we come up with a bit of advice, or what we call NBA, next best action, what we have to do is we actually have to teach people how to use that advice, how to take advantage of that tool, how to use that tool and take it to their clients. And so there's a multi-step process. And so we don't have that sort of tight test and learn loop that a lot of machine learning folks or data scientists would be used to, because ultimately everything we do is empowering this personal process, this process where two people get together, they talk about planning, they talk about their goals for the future, they talk about their risk appetites, and then we turn around and we use the tools. And so there's not this, millisecond type feedback loop like you would get with a traditional machine learning. So for us, the biggest challenge is taking all of the power that data can provide, but then getting our field folks to adopt it and to understand it and to learn from it and then share it with clients, and then to also figure out what's working and then bring that back into the machine learning loop. So doing data by itself and machine learning and AI, I think, is great. It's a little trickier when you have a continuous process and you've got people on both ends of that process. And so for us, I think that's the biggest challenge, is that we don't get to be kind of just data, just technology in the way that other companies do, because that's not our business model.
Yeah, that was cool. So Holly or Chad, either other challenges that you guys are seeing in getting value from the data?
Sure. So just as Chad mentioned earlier, it's an ever-changing landscape from a technology perspective, and we certainly face that at Sargento as well, where we had put together a plan really about 18 months ago of what technology we were going to utilize for our new business intelligence environment. And as we continued to learn more and time progressed, we realized that we really needed to pivot, take a hard stop and a look at what technologies we felt were best of breed and going to be best for our journey. And so one of the things that we did that proved very successful for us, and may be relevant to others on this call, is we decided to do a proof of concept with 3 different technology stacks, basically like a bake-off, to not only learn about them, but also determine what capabilities were real, which ones were the most impactful for us, and how difficult it may be to stand up these environments. And we did this at basically zero cost to Sargento through the help of the partners that we were working with. And we really learned a lot from that process, and we're ultimately able to learn and determine our future go forward path through that effort. So I highly recommend that to others who are really trying to determine what their path looks like, to consider what they could do from a proof of concept perspective and help them understand what the benefits could be, and keep that learning ahead before you actually go through an implementation. I learned from Gartner that the majority of business intelligence projects or data and analytics projects at companies fail due to low adoption, missed requirements, misunderstanding of what the customers want. So, we're really hoping to avoid some of those pitfalls by learning about the tools and doing a proof of concept in advance.
Cool. Chad, what about you? What challenges are you seeing?
Yeah, I think a little bit of some similarities to what both Neil and Holly talked about. I think in terms of the connection with our business partners and them kind of finding this pairing between what is it that they think they want and what is the art of the possible, right? And so while we have a large footprint in different parts of the world, we at our roots are still kind of a Midwestern manufacturing company, right? Like a lot of others on the call. And so the types of things that our business leaders are typically asking for is historical reporting, right? What happened yesterday, or even what happened right now, as opposed to this art of the possible of now that these capabilities and tools are so much more advanced than that. How do we help bring their skill level up? How do we introduce them to what the capabilities are? How do we as IT act as not just the technology provider, but also sort of that consultative or advisor to them on how they can change the way that they operate their business, change the way they're making decisions, and get them sort of, instead of looking backwards, looking forwards. And along with that comes trust, in that they have to now sort of trust the models and what the models are saying, right? And take that in. And that's something that I think is a big leap for a lot of them as well, that they're used to traditional methods for how they would come up with a demand forecast for who's going to buy what products in the future. And so how do you shift them to say, what we need to do is instead of using systems, as one input and sort of coming up with what we believe is the answer on our own, how do we put focus on master data maintenance and transactional data accuracy and data quality going in, so then we can benefit from the intelligence of the models as they're executed. So there's a lot of behavioral things that we're having to try and change in the organization, as well as even just sort of the shift from business case development, where we're so used to coming in and saying, okay, what is it that you want to build? And it's a capital investment, and it's got to have a payback, and it's going to be X number of months long. And this is kind of the traditional way of thinking. And then we go execute in a waterfall type fashion, trying to now say, no, actually what we need is we need a little bit more of an investment on good faith here, where we need to say, look, these are the types of capabilities we believe we can build. We need to do some POCs or prototypes. We need to learn while we go through this exercise. And that's the benefit of the money that we're spending, is the learnings. And then we'll iterate on that over a period of time. And so that, that even spans over into the finance organization of how do they look at kind of the accounting around these initiatives different from traditional IT projects.
It's striking that you guys come from such 3 different industries in very different spots, and yet you have a lot of similarities between your stories. I mean, Chad, to follow up on that, Chad, but so if you had to start over right now, or what are some lessons learned or a thing you wish you knew when you started this journey? Anything to share?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think in some ways we had a little bit of that blessing in order to get to do that, right? Because I said we're kind of in our 2nd generation now, that we had done a lot of this as part of our other sort of ownership structure, and now we were forced to kind of do it again. So from a technology stack standpoint, and in the flexibility of putting things in the cloud, the flexibility of turning things up and down, the change initiative of driving people in order to consolidate sources of information. We were able to retire a number of standalone data warehouses as we did this. I think that was all a lesson learned. I think along with that, we've got to learn that in some of these projects, you can't solve it just in the analytics platform. We did that for a number of years, where we kind of separated analytics projects from source system projects, and those 2 teams didn't work well together. And now what we're having to say is, maybe to solve that problem, you actually have to make changes to your source business process, or the way that you're collecting sort of the source data and the fidelity that you have there and the accuracy, in order to get the outcome that you want in analytics. Otherwise, you're going to use these new, expensive, sophisticated tools, and you're going to have to make too many assumptions, right? You're going to make sort of too many concessions in order to try and get the answer you want, that once again, you might have trouble with adoption or with the business trusting it. So I'd say, if you're looking at at solving a problem, you almost have to look at that entire data flow of where does it come from, what's happening in the source systems, and how does it end up on driving the outcome that you want. Otherwise, I think the accuracy will be, can be brought into question. And then I think the second one that I'll call out here is when you get sort of outside the company and you start dealing with data, which is dealing with customers, vendors, commercializing data, exchanging data with partners, the other functions that need to get involved and need to get involved early is a big lesson learned. That when we did this battery tester program and we were working with a kind of a joint development project with the test device company, and then also even the customers that now, picture our customers are folks like AutoZone or Advanced Auto Parts. Now they're the ones that actually are holding on to that test device out in the field, conducting that work. And now that data from essentially their consumer and their technician are being extracted back into our environment via this test company's device, right? So you got a lot of handoffs, a lot of parties involved there. And so bringing legal into that conversation, bringing data privacy, data governance into that conversation, bringing the commercial teams into that conversation, and trying to think through how that's going to work, and almost building out or mapping those data flows early on in the process to say, okay, who all has a stake in this and who all needs to be involved? Because it's a case where IT can kind of sit in a vacuum and draw things up on a whiteboard of how data is going to move around, and then we can go build the plumbing, as I call it. But it's important that you don't get caught by surprise by either other folks claiming rights to the data or refusing to share it once you've built the plumbing, et cetera. And so I think that was a big lesson learned for us as we start to embark on things that are kind of outside of our four walls, the number of other stakeholders that need to be involved early on in the project.
Neil, when we talked earlier, I mean, you had a similar observation about stakeholders and lessons learned.
Yeah, I would share kind of two things. First, on that question of stakeholders, there was a real challenge. One of the things I think we all wish we knew was that when you're dealing in an environment that's got significant risk associated with it, so for example, you're doing underwriting and you're worried about disparate impact to different populations, right? Something that happens in credit scores and in other arenas. You need the other functions to operate as fast as your machine learning, right? That it's one thing to come up with let's say a new refined underwriting model every day, but if that has to go through model audit review and you actually have to have a compliance team and an auditing team look at it, et cetera, and they can't operate on a daily cycle, then what good is it to be able to update your model every day, to do that sort of machine learning? And so sometimes you end up, you can't move any faster than privacy and compliance and audit and other groups can. And so that getting stakeholders to be able to operate at the speed of data is just as important as getting the systems up to full speed and getting a sort of a complete 360 view of your customers and building good algorithms, et cetera. Because again, it's, I think the part that we can sometimes do is sort of look internally, look at the IT problem, look at the tech problem, come up with an elegant solve. But if it's not operating at the same clock speed as the rest of the organization, that's a real challenge. So that's one thing I think we have learned over time. And it's kind of a hand-holding partnership that, sometimes we help our partners to speed up a little bit, and sometimes they help us to slow down. That we actually had a couple of processes where we were basically told we were releasing too fast, that the pace of change was too high, and that if we would slow down, we would get our reviews done with more accuracy and completeness. They just couldn't be as frequent because we became kind of overwhelming. And data isn't a cottage industry. It's there to support the business. And if you're going faster than the business can consume, then you do need to slow down. So I think that was kind of thing one. Thing two, and this was an interesting one. This is one of the, I think, maybe unique challenges for us. When we look at our persistency, right? How long somebody is with the company, how long do they have, for example, a whole life insurance policy, a permanent life insurance policy. I don't know if you guys know, but our typical policy length is about 43 years. And so when you talk to data scientists and they say, listen, we want to run a new experiment, we want to create a new model. We want to, we think we have this really good idea for superior underwriting. You can say, fine, that's great. Let's get it out there. We'll make some sales. We'll do some classifications, and you'll get feedback on your algorithm in 43 years, right? 43 years from now, you will know if it worked and whether or not you can make a change. It turns out that is not how they are used to working. You may not know this, but they would like to wait, 43 minutes and run an experiment and do a report and maybe take a look at a product quality or an output. And so for us, that was something that was also very, very different, that we deal with a product that is in place for a very long period of time. And so when you're dealing with something like underwriting and you don't know, you have to use very, very different techniques. So you start looking back in the past and you start to look at, previous iterations, and you say, well, what if I were doing the underwriting for this person who got a policy in 1973 and I want to project forward to see if my algorithm works? Then it turns out you have a whole different set of problems. You're like, well, do I have a complete data set for them? I can't go back and ask them what they were thinking in 1973. I can't look at their credit scores because those weren't invented until 1989. And so how do I do this? And so it's been a really fascinating journey to try to do data science in a product space that is very, very slow moving, and it takes a very long time to know if you're successful.
A 43-year-old average customer length is amazing to me.
it's a fantastic problem to have, but it does create some challenges for the machine learning, certainly.
Yeah, that's interesting. Holly, anything to add on from lessons learned for the group?
Sure, yeah, just building off of what Chad had mentioned about making sure that your data and analytics program and investments are aligned to key business outcomes. One of the lessons learned we've had from past projects is making sure that we set our metrics and how we're measuring success up front. And it sounds obvious, right? But I just read this week that Gartner does an annual survey of their customers in data and analytics every year, and they found that only 23% of companies said that they have metrics aligned to their data and analytics investments that are based off of business outcomes. So one of the things that we're going to try to do is set up those metrics in advance so that we really understand the true success of the investments we're going to have. So wish us luck on that, but it's certainly a good goal to have, and hopefully that continues to drive our path in the future so that we can course correct as things continue to advance in this space.
All right, cool. So I see that we have some Q&A lined up, which is great. Before we get to that, just one round robin quick question, just like a forecasting one. So 5 years from now, do you think companies in your industry will have migrated all of their data and analytics to the cloud? Just open. Chad, Holly, Neil?
Yeah, I think the analytics processing for sure, right? I think that will need to be in the cloud for sure. I think the source data, source systems are still going to be a hybrid. I think that's going to be dependent upon the use cases, especially in a manufacturing environment where you may have some data that needs to be in a shop floor type situation. But I think the processing, the capabilities of the cloud, what it brings, and then the ability to manage cost, the ability to manage processing power, and then the availability of access, I'd say for sure.
No, Holly?
I'd echo what Chad said. Our goal isn't to have everything and all transactional data in the cloud in 5 years, but rather the most important data elements that drive key business decisions will certainly be in the cloud on our data and analytics platform.
Neil?
Yeah, for us, it's a very kind of nuanced and subtle answer. And that would be yes. I think so, without reservation.
All right, that's fine. So I'm turning to Sam. Do we have some questions from the audience? right. Sam, you're on mute, so let me try while you get off mute. Sam Hilgendorf has asked the following question. What is your philosophy around self-service for your business units and or customers with your data tools? Why do you lean in that direction? How do you balance governance, consistency, and business line empowerment against that philosophy? Anyone?
I'm happy to start. We do have a focus on self-service that, we think about our data initiatives internally, sort of back office and business facing as kind of a hub and spoke. So we have a central group that works on tools enablement and data consistency and oversight and governance. But the data and analytics teams live in their various functions. So they'll live in marketing, or they'll live in distribution, or they'll live in finance. And for us, that implies a self-service model. So we get the benefit of a central build, central scale, central data repositories. But at the end of the day, self-service is the way to go. What we've found is if you build a better mousetrap, adoption isn't really a challenge. If you don't provide a better service than the alternative, meaning that if they're currently doing something themselves and you offer them a 1.0 and you offer them a base set of capabilities, et cetera, but they've got their own Power BI warehouse that does 10 times as much and requires 10 times less effort, then you're never going to win that battle. If you have to mandate they use it, you won't get them to go to self-service. So for us, we've got this kind of hub and spoke, and self-service has been successful, but only because we've, I think, done a better job than what they were doing on their own. We took advantage of scale, we got them more data, and frankly, we got them better tools that didn't have to hit their own budget to do the development. And internally, that's a really good incentive to motivate self-service.
Philosophy is to lean into self-service to a greater extent than we've been able to do in the past, but certainly with some guardrails around data governance and making sure that we've got the appropriate data governance established through the help of everyone. So not just IT leading that data governance, but it being driven across the organization so that we're all self-governing one another and we affirm the quality and the decisions that we're making without getting out of bounds.
Yeah, I would just add, I think we're really trying to seed the organization. And so some of the folks that we've hired in through essentially an analytics COE in IT, our intention is career path wise that they grow out and become those experts in the different functions, because I think we're taking a mindset which is many businesses have run on Excel, right? Kind of every department has their one or two couple Excel gurus that kind of sit at the end of the row and do all the number crunching for that department to make decisions. And I think we see this as the future of that, is that we need to replace those folks. We need to either upskill those folks, right? Help them become competent with these new tool sets, or it's the next generation folks that will come in and take over those chairs, and they'll be working in the Power BIs, and they'll understand how to sort of essentially execute the queries and build the machine learning scripts that are necessary for the future.
Okay.
Scott, and my audio is back on, so I'm happy to take over. And of course, when you are panicking about IT things, it's of course the worst time ever, right? So the next question, we have a lot of questions, so this is great. The next question is from Tabitha. Have you had any issues with adoption being an issue in your organization to become data focused? Most of our clients talk about culture being a blocker at the IT leadership level. Have you had to engage any centers of excellence initiatives, governance teams, or engage buy-in from the top down? How are you ensuring that your teams are embracing this throughout the organization?
Maybe I'll start. I would say I agree with the couple comments Neil made. You got to have a little bit of a better mousetrap if you're trying to turn people back, and what you're the problem that you're solving has already been solved before in a different way, even though that way may be more manual. You're going to have an uphill battle. But then I'd say the other thing that we've been fortunate with recently is executive support. And support meaning not a mandate to use the new, but actually a directive to retire the old, to sunset the old, right? That if you had department A that had built their own models in Excel or otherwise, and you had department B that had built their own models, the answer is typically never tied to one another. And so as a general manager or a leader, you would look at that and say, I'm getting different information from different people, right? And so they're very much in support of a single set of models, a single source of truth. And so if you can get their buy-in to that and get them to start mandating that they're not going to pay attention essentially to those legacy techniques and models, and they need to be shut down, that's been a huge enabler for us.
It seems that one of the inhibitors of adoption is the disbelief in the data itself or the output of the data is showing, particularly when compared to the old Excel models or the old way of doing things. So one of our plans, which I know others have adopted, is to reinvigorate our program around data ownership and data stewards within every department at the company, thereby fostering that ownership and the cleanup and understanding of the data to the departments itself, and engage with the Excel experts who were in those roles before to empower them to take it to the next step. So we're hoping that involvement level will help on the adoption curve and see the successes with that transition.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think I would echo what Holly said. There is definitely, I think, a couple of things. Peter Drucker had that quote that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And especially with something new and a different way of working, I think that's very, very true. To Holly's point, though, I think we see kind of a couple of things. There is that skepticism. There is the question around, is the data good? Do I trust it? It's different. Why should I abandon what's been working for me for a long time? And that skepticism is a healthy one. It helps, test to make sure that we're really providing value. The second thing is probably simpler. The second cultural element is just inertia itself, right? People are comfortable with the tool set they have. They're comfortable with the way that they're working, and they've maybe done it for years. I do think, the point earlier that businesses are run on Excel spreadsheets, a lot of them have been historically and still are. And these are successful businesses, right? And if it was successful, why take the risk? Why change? Why learn a new tool set? So I think culture, at least here and every other place I've ever been, has been a significant sort of impediment to all sorts of change. It's not just around data, but it's that sort of skepticism coupled with the inertia that make change difficult in this space.
Scott, I think we have about 1 minute left, so
Yeah.
that isn't a time before we jump into the lengthy question, but I'll let you kind of wind us up.
We could go on forever. This has been great. Those are great questions. And, Chad, Holly, Neil, thank you very much for your insights. It's been great. And thank you, all of you, for your support of United Way.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks so much, Scott. It was a pleasure to be here.
And thanks everyone for participating.
Appreciate it.
Bye, guys.